not making this up. This comes from none other than the White House. You can look up the White House. I just posted it. My friend sent it to me. And actually, an executive order or some kind of
For
official
space
document
weather.
from the White House.
For space weather and how it can affect our power grid. Yep.
Something like that. Yeah, from the official government document saying we'll get prepared for long-term power outages. So they're telling us about it. I mean, and what's his name? Ed Koppel, who used to be a ABC TV evening reporter.
Mm-hmm.
Ted Koppel, remember him?
Oh, yeah.
He wrote a book that warning about this. He wrote an entire book. And now Dr. Michio Kaku, a physicist at State University, I think, New York, or City University of New York, also is warning about it. So many people are warning about these power outage failures long term. The reason they would be long term is because the solar emissions that I was just talking about are what is causing, I believe, long term chronic solar blasting. Is hitting the Earth's magnetic field. And you had asked me a question which I didn't really address yet. You said, has it got anything to do with our magnetic field? And well, the sun's solar electrified particles, protons and electrons, that are being blasted out in all directions, some of which strike Earth's magnetic field. Well, those moving electrons, as I mentioned before, they themselves, those streams of electrons coming from the sun and streams of protons, actually each stream creates a little magnetic field encircling it concentrically, sort of like a spring. If you were to take an arrow, here's another analogy, put an arrow through a coiled spring, a garage door spring, and that arrow would represent the straight line travel of the protons, which are positive electrically charged particles, or also that arrow would represent the straight line travel of the electrons, which are negative electric particles. Mm-hmm. Well, both kinds of particles create magnetic fields, which are sort of analogous in shape anyway to the coiled garage door spring. So you've got all these magnetic fields that are impacting trillions of them, in a big solar wave of particles called the solar wind, and it's blasting the Earth's magnetic field, creating electromagnetic streams like coils that I just described, which impact Earth's magnetic field. And now you have what I liken to electromagnetic jousting, where you see two people fighting with swords or with these long jousting poles, and knights in armor jousting one another. Well, you have the jousting of magnetic fields between the sun's solar blasting of magnetic fields and the Earth's magnetic field. And this impacts the Earth's magnetic field. It feeds back that energy from the sun, electromagnetic energy from the sun feeds back electromagnetically, right, from the Earth's outer core, like the skin of an apple, along the skin, right into the top of the apple, the dimple at the top of the apple, that goes into the center core, if you liken the Earth to an apple. So that electromagnetic energy travels thousands of miles from the Earth's magnetic field in space, right into the center of Earth, wherein is located our Earth's solid metal inner core. And that's what I believe has been laterally shifting Earth's solid metal inner core off of its center point and eventually causing the jet stream to ripple like a roller coaster.
If it continues, if it continues to go off center, and really unbalance things, wouldn't that in turn cause at some point a pole shift?
Definitely, you're right. It would cause a wobbling of Earth, and I expect to see a wobbling. I mean, we have to expect to see a wobbling.
Would we see that? I mean, if we were out at night looking at the stars, would we notice the wobble? Would we see it?
I'm glad you brought that up. The ancients, let's go by past reports. The ancient survivors of the last incursion of Planet X into our solar system, which occurred around 36 and a half centuries ago. And we can prove it. I'll try to make it quick, because I don't want to get too far off of one point.
Okay.
But I want to prove to you that it occurred 36 and a half centuries ago. Our geologists studying the great Santorini explosion, which had a volcanic explosive index, VEI, greater than according to their studies of past geological events, greater than we've ever experienced in modern days. The great volcanic explosion of the Santorini volcano in the Aegean Sea on the island of Thera. It's well known. It destroyed the Minoan, highly civilized Minoan civilization. Well, that volcanic explosion, they can date it back by counting tree rings. Tree rings are a great way to with high resolution, determine a date in ancient history. Because each year, as you know, the trees will grow one layer of skin.
Mm-hmm.
And then each year that skin piles up and builds up, so that if you were to cut the tree, you would be able to count the layers and tell the age of the tree. We all know that. So I guess the trees they're looking at were petrified trees, where they were able to do carbon dating, and with carbon dating you could determine the date of something that's petrified. So when you would put that together, with the carbon dating put together with the counting of the rings, scientists have been able to actually determine when the great volcanic explosion of the Santorini volcano occurred. It caused tree rings to become narrowed because, obviously, when a volcano explodes, when many volcanoes explode around the world, they kick up all this black ash that blocks out the sunlight. So now the vegetation becomes starved. And that's why you see narrow tree rings, which they can count almost to the year, plus or minus 10 years. Count to be somewhere around, as I recall, 1630 BC, 1640, somewhere around there. I don't even remember the exact year. But you can look it up on Wikipedia. That's another good thing about, me putting out all this information. People might say, well, he sounds like convincing, but I don't know. He's just saying a lot of words. Now's your opportunity, folks. You can prove it all. Grab a pen and paper now. I forgot to tell you from the beginning of the show, start writing down keywords that I mentioned: Santorini, Santorini, volcano, and BC. Write down the term BC, and then you'll get reports as to when they believe that it exploded just by counting tree rings. They counted the tree rings in the British Isles and in Canada, and they found it all to be the same. This great narrowing of tree rings occurred around 1650, approximately, plus or minus 10 years BC. So, now that was like 36 and a half centuries ago. And we've all been told that Planet X comes in every 36 and a half centuries because it is on a cometary orbit. Comets are like a pendulum, a cosmic pendulum that swings back and forth. Now, we all know that a pendulum on a grandfather's clock is very precisely periodic, regularly, uniformly periodic. That you can count you can measure the number of seconds or fractions of a second that a grandfather's clock pendulum swings. Well, similarly, we have cosmic pendulum, which are comets. Comets come into the sun, and what is the force that's pulling them in? It's the sun. The sun pulls them in, they come in, and some of them crash into the sun and cease to exist. Others, like Halley's Comet, we know come in at amazingly regular intervals of, I think it's something like every 75 years Halley's Comet comes in. So imagine a bigger comet, what they call long period comets, taking not 75 years to come in, but 36 and a half centuries to come in and out. But it's regular, it's predictable, it's chronologically predictable. So now we have we're saying 36 and a half centuries. Well, how can we prove what we've been told, that this Planet X comes in every 36 and a half centuries? We know for sure that the geologists or the ecologists who study ancient ecology have proven that the tree rings were narrowed roughly 36 and a half centuries ago, around 1650 BC, which coincides with the great exodus of the Israelites from Egypt, which is historically recorded in the book of Exodus of the Bible. Okay, but we still don't know if it's every 36 and a half centuries unless we can go back another 36 and a half centuries before 1650 BC and prove it, that it's periodically regular, uniform. Well, let's count back, do some arithmetic, and go back from 1650 BC, when the great exodus of the Israelites occurred from Egypt, where God created all of these natural disasters due to comets coming into our solar system. God created all this to liberate the Israelites from Egypt. 36 and a half centuries before 1650 BC takes you, 36 and a half centuries before 1650 BC takes you to around 5300 BC. I didn't do the arithmetic now because I had done it before, so I already remembered. 5300 BC was the previous incursion, the second past incursion of Planet X into our solar system. Now, if that's true, we should see geological disasters occurring around 5300 BC. And sure enough, there are two famous geologists, Pittman. People should be writing this down, checking it out, because the only way you're going to really believe it is when you look it up yourself and do your own study, and you become your own historian. You become your own researcher, and you say, wow, I've done the research myself. I can take this to the bank. I know it's happening. Therefore, I know I must get prepared. Whereas if you just hear me say it and you don't check it out yourself, you're not going to believe it, and you're not going to get prepared. So you write down Pittman and Ryan, I think it's Pittmann, and Ryan, Ryan. Just look up those two names, and they're just write in the term BC, and you'll get some of their reports that they had done research on the Black Sea. This Black Sea had actually overflowed, and when it was like sort of on a plateau, I believe, as I recall, and it overflowed into the Straits of Bosphorus. I'm just going by memory, so I may have some, the variations in my recollection that are not accurate. But I'm pretty sure it overflowed into the Straits of Bosphorus or into the Mediterranean somehow. And they've shown from studying silt deposits in the Black Sea that overflow, that great flooding overflow of the Black Sea occurred around 5300 BC. So now we have 2 points, 2 index points to show us, look, we can measure between 1650 BC, the disasters of the tree rings narrowing, the explosion of the great Santorini volcano, and many, many other volcanoes on Earth, 1650 BC. Use that as one index point, and then another index point would be 5300 BC. So there you go. It is 36 and a half centuries ago. Between disastrous events, 36 and a half centuries. But let's try to go back one more, just to seal our evidence that indeed that the period, the time between each great Earth disaster is about 36 and a half centuries. We need to know this because if it's true, then the next Earth disaster, is about to occur sometime soon in a foreseeable future. Okay, let's go back let's count back 36 and a half centuries back before 5300 BC, which was the Great Flood of Noah's Day, 5300 BC. Let's count back 36 and a half centuries before that, and you wind up around 9000 BC. Now, many people, it's so far back that many people are confused or mistaken about dating the great sinking of Atlantis. But some of your best archaeologists are saying they believe it occurred around 9000 BC. And if that's true, and I believe it is, 9000 BC was when the great sinking of Atlantis occurred. That was a tremendous Earth disaster.
I just read a report where there's a certain bison that was common in Japan and Asia, Canada, and they found a well-preserved tail of this thing I believe it was in Siberia, and they're now going to bring this thing back to life. South Korea and Russia. They said that it was believed to have lived about 11,200, maybe 11,300 years ago. And I kind of question, well, what happened 11,200 or 11,300 years ago that killed it? I think of Atlantis.
It's around 9,000 BC, yeah.
Yeah.
Around 9,000 BC. Let's see now. It died, and they're trying to bring it back to life, did you say?
Yeah, it was extinct, and they're now going to bring it back, resurrect it, if you will.
Wow. This is amazing.
It is. And look, we've got a break coming up here. So he says, Ken, if we lose power and this starts fires, how would we handle something like that?
How would we handle fires? Well, fires caused by any source, we would have to, I haven't really studied, but I mean, that reminds me, what I need to do is check my fire extinguishers.
Yeah.
I need to look at the instructions on how to use it, get outside and actually go through a mock usage of the fire extinguishers that I have. In fact, I better actually turn them on to make sure they work because they're pretty old. So that's the first thing you need to do is be prepared for a fire. I may have to buy new fire extinguishers, and I'm perfectly willing to do that. They may have better capabilities now than they did 20 years ago when I bought mine. I think I should go out and buy some new fire extinguishers.
I had a job, and they were re-upping on all that stuff, and they were going to just toss them out. And the boss man said, well, if you want to take them home, take them home. So I took some home with me. They're, some were half full, but hell, they're expired, but I guess you're not supposed to, but I took them, thank God I've never had to use them.
That's a good point. Expired. I mean, mine must be expired too. So, I mean, I better check mine out. But I think I just better buy new ones. So it's worth the expense just to buy. They're probably better technology anyway.
Oh yeah, I'm sure
that's the first thing you need to do.
Okay. And now Annie asks. She says, "What do you think?"
Second thing to do is your smoke detectors are the most important. So if there's a fire due to electrical problems or a power outage or whatever, You need the smoke detectors. Of course, they're battery operated. When you have a power outage, you should have a battery charger, which means you need some power source to give you minimal power, like solar. Because I've been in electronics for so many years, I built my own solar not panel, but solar control system. And so what you need to do is order one, look up solar controllers, and get a few solar panels. It doesn't have to be a lot, but you get just enough to give you power to charge your whatever you need, like basic devices that are emergency devices, such as lights. And
Yeah.
so that's how you can power your vital smoke detectors, which can tell you when a fire is occurring, and you'll be ready to extinguish it with your brand new fire extinguisher.
And I won't waste money on cheap old batteries. When I get batteries, I like to get rechargeable batteries, and so that I can recharge them. But I guess if the power's out, then you're going to have a way to, like you said, have a little solar thingamajigger there to get some power so that you can charge them back up, right?
Right, because they don't require very much power, so you can just get a couple solar panels. I have 4 solar panels, actually. I have 2 that I use and 2 that I can plug in addition whenever I might need it when the power does go out. So yeah, get that. And then I have a generator. You can get this too. It's like a generator that puts out a pretty good sinusoidal signal that's supposedly good enough. It's called an inverter. No, not an inverter, actually. It's more than an inverter. It's just a standard generator. But this gives you a nice clean sine wave that you can operate your laptop or whatever on. And it's made by Yamaha. This little thing only weighs 27 pounds, and it's about the size of a suitcase or smaller. And excuse me, I hung it up with these what are they? These plastic poles, rods, pipes, plastic piping, 3/4 inch diameter. Cut it with a hacksaw. Hung it up in a dog cage. You ever see those dog cages? And you can actually hang them up because they have like metal loops around the top. So I got a dog cage and I hung it up underneath my deck, underneath the floor joists of my deck. So it's still a little bit below. If you can hit your head on it if you're not careful. But it's pretty well shielded by the underside of the deck. And then I covered it with plastic so the rain wouldn't ruin it. And that's my 1 kilowatt power source, which is pretty good. I mean, you can operate a lot of stuff with that. Anyway,
yeah,
that's another piece of information regarding emergency power, because the greatest disaster is going to be loss of power for months and years, probably years, because these $1 million transformers that can only come from China. And how are you going to get them from China if China has power outages and there's no shipping because there's no power at the ports and there's no transportation on the highways because all the power is out? So those $1 million transformers that are needed to replace the ones that are blown and sizzled by the solar blasting that's about to occur, which our government tells us is going to occur, those transformers will never get here. So we'll have, like, you might as well say, the remainder of our lifetime, we'll have to live without power. So, and that's going to be, it's going to be disastrous. Starvation. Nobody knows how to grow food. But so you got to store food. Store as much canned food, dry grains and stuff. That's, I don't have to tell you all about amaranth.
Yeah, well,
that amaranth. It's a high-protein grain that they kept the Incas alive on.
And the whole people not knowing how to grow food, I mean, a lot of that was intentional to get us dependent on just going to these stores so that, they want to take away the stores and everybody's scratching their head, how do I eat? But people better, I'll tell you, John, I tried to grow, people are probably sick of me saying this, I repeat it a lot, but it's true. I tried to grow vegetables and such in my backyard. I had gardens. I've done it my whole life. And we put together a nice little setup, and the plants grew nice and strong, and the flowers were good, but no bees came along to pollinate them, and I got nothing at all.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. It's going to be disastrous. Well, first thing we've got to do is store enough food to keep us alive for a while until we get the hang of growing our own food, which means we've got to start storing seeds. And, you can get a lot of nutrition out of the stuff that you grow indoors. Like, for example, you can get enough to keep you alive almost if you sprout inside using jars in your house. So, and this way, when you've got the protection of your house to keep your food sheltered. But whereas if you have a garden outside, your starving neighbors are going to become marauders, ripping off everything in your garden because they and their families are starving. So you can't grow anything outdoors when there's a society is in chaos, in starvation mode. Right. It's going to be horrible. But this is bad news, but it's also good news. If you can store enough food and keep yourself undercover long enough, I hate to even say this, but in a couple of weeks, everybody else who threatens you, they'll be dead. So you won't have any threats around you.
Well, that's
I don't
true.
know whether to laugh or cry at that.
Well, yeah, I mean, in a sense, that'd be a blessing, I guess. I mean, that's true. A lot of those people who are unprepared and their whole plan of preparedness is to rob their neighbors. Those people probably won't be around very long. Annie has a question here. She says, "What do you think about brown dwarfs spewing up helium when it comes by? What effect would this gas have on us and our atmosphere?"
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it does spew out helium. Like, for example, Jupiter, our largest planet in our solar system, is similar in nature to a brown dwarf. It's similar in nature to Planet X insofar as it is a gas giant, and it's almost large enough to actually create nuclear fusion, as our sun does. Now, there's methane. I don't know what the gases are. Maybe methane. I haven't really studied it too well. I don't know anything about helium. No, wait a minute. Maybe you're right. You're right. When you have nuclear fusion, you have helium produced. Did she say helium?
Yeah,
Was
helium.
that the word?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, you're right, because its sun actually produces helium in nuclear fusion. It fuses hydrogen, which has a nucleus of one. The nucleus of hydrogen is very small, the smallest of all the elements, I believe. It has only one proton in its nucleus, whereas most of the other atoms have more than one proton in a nuclei, which defines their character. Oxygen, for example, has 16 protons comprising its nucleus, which that's the characteristic of oxygen. That's just an example. Hydrogen has only one proton. So what happens with hydrogen is when you have nuclear fusion, two hydrogen atoms are actually crunched together, and you wind up with not H1 hydrogen, but H2. The number 2 represents the number of protons in the nucleus, and you wind up with the distinct element of helium.
Right.
So it does have helium and the nuclear fusion. I don't know how much is spewed out. I can tell you with our sun. Our sun is another good example, a good way of describing the chemical characteristics of a brown dwarf star, because our sun is a star. It's just bigger than a brown dwarf star. So, but our sun blows out electrons and protons, again, which are protons, which are hydrogen and nuclei minus their single valence electron. So it blows out hydrogen and electrons, but hydrogen protons, I should say, and electrons. But I don't know anything about the sun blowing out helium.
I see.
I just don't. I don't think that's going to be a serious issue.
And it might be the least of our worries too. So.
Well, yeah, because what the sun is going to do is, this brown dwarf star is like a vacuum cleaner or a magnet in space. As it travels through space, junk-littered deep space, far beyond our solar system, comes in from millions, billions of miles away, and it drags and gravitationally attracts all kinds of objects. It attracts small planets, it attracts comets, it attracts asteroids, it attracts even iron oxide dust. That's particles of all sizes. So when it comes in, it looks like a hazy green, hazy red object. And someone has actually somehow smuggled pictures, films of it, at least a film clip of this Planet X, which we believe came from the South Pole Telescope. It's a quasi-secret telescopic location of infrared telescopic site that our government has secretly erected in the South Pole, the harshest environment you can imagine. Why would they do that? Putting up a telescope in the harshest environment on Earth in the South Pole, because that's where Planet X was coming in, below the Earth's ecliptic, between the solar system's ecliptic plane, which is that imaginary disk in space. I visualize it as like a glass disk on which all the planets revolve around the sun. And someone captured these films and put them on the internet under the name Nibiru Shock 2012, and they were taken down really quickly. And I just hope that person who may have worked at that South Pole Telescope is still alive. But the bottom, basically what I was saying was that the pictures show, and I have them on my website too, is a hazy red glow around this object. It looks almost like a flame of a candle. If you were to run with a candle in your outstretched arm, the flame would sort of be pulled back, stretched backwards. And that's what this object looks like with a stretched backwards tail.
Is there
The whole thing is glowing red.
is there somewhere we could see these pictures, even though this guy's not around?
Yeah, I had Sheldon. I think Marshall Masters had it, and I got it somehow. It's on my my website, which is excuse me. It's a long name, but it's simply just remember thelightofdayradioshow.com. That was from my friend, the webmaster Sheldon Day. It's thelightofdayradioshow.com. When you go there, you'll see a big Planet X logo at the top of the page. Click on that logo. You have to wait a few seconds for it to load, because there's a tremendous number of my audio interviews in my Planet X audio dramas, very interesting, exciting musical dramas that I put up about Planet X. So it's loaded with lots of data, and it takes a little while to load. But when you click on that Planet X logo at the top of the page of thelightofdayradioshow.com, it'll take you to my Planet X page, and then you'll see at the very top is a clip of that Nibiru Shock 2012 release, which was suppressed. And Marshall Masters may have some stuff like that too.
Well, I have a lot of faith in you, John. I don't have as much faith in Marshall Masters, and the only reason why is because he used to come on the show, and I seen somebody had pointed out discrepancy in one of his pictures, and I asked him about it, and his response was "F off." I mean, I was just asking him, so he got a little mad.
Terrible. I mean, a person should not be that sensitive. Where
it happens.
Everyone should be prepared to answer questions. I mean, that's what we're here for.
Right now, how do I get to that picture again? I'm on the website now.
Oh, good. Okay, did you see it? The red glowing object with a tail. That tail.
Well, I'm on the front page. I see Sheldon. I see Planet X passes soon. So where do I go?
Okay, it's a big X logo. It looks like a picture of a comet, a red comet.
Oh,
Just click on that big X.
All right.
That's the logo. Yeah, Planet X.
Oh, okay, there it is.
Now at the very top, you'll see a little film clip.
Yeah.
At the very top,
Nibiru
when you get to
Shock.
that page.
Oh, I'm there. Yep, I'm watching. I see it now. Yep.
And what you could do is just type in Nibiru Shock 2012 when you get to YouTube. All one word, Nibiru Shock, S-H-O-C-K, 2012. And, it reminds me, there's so many things in my mind about this whole Planet X thing. I just can't remember them all at once. But, here's what I'm glad that my mind is still functioning after all this information and going through all this. But anyway, that reminds me that there's a friend of mine in Italy named Luca Scantamburlo, and you can look him up too. You should be taking notes. You can write down Scantamburlo. Luca Scantamburlo. Anyway, he's a researcher. He was in contact with a man by the name of, in Italy, a UFOlogist, UFO researcher who had his own magazine. His name was Cristoforo Barbato, B-A-R-B-A-T-O, Cristoforo Barbato, both in around Naples, Italy. Anyway, Luca told me, and others, he was on other shows, he talked about what's called the Jesuit footage, and I think they took it off. I can't find it anymore. He told his story. Cristoforo Barbato was approached by a man who said, I work for the Vatican. I'm a secret agent for the Servizio Informazioni del Vaticano, which stands for Vatican Information Services. No one is supposed to know that this organization even exists. But we all know the Vatican. They're very likely to have their own CIA. In fact, I don't want to offend any Catholics, but they may have their own assassination team, too. I don't know. But anyway, this man says, I work for the Servizio Informazioni del Vaticano, the Vatican Information Services, and Barbato was very suspicious. He said, show me your information, your credentials. And he showed him some credentials, and he says, I've got these footage for you, Mr. Barbato. This was taken by the Vatican. The Vatican is very much into Planet X. This gives you another major clue that this thing is real and that their power elite are very concerned about it. He says that what they did was this. This is what this agent, who was not supposed to talk, told Barbato. He said, what they do, they have the connection, the Vatican has a connection with the United States government. They launched a hypersonic aircraft from Edwards Air Force Base, I believe it was, Edwards Air Force Base in California. secret launch, of course, up into space, high enough to launch this camera. Very small, I guess it was a small probe with a camera on it. And this probe is traveling way, way out into deep space. Keeps on going, just like the Pioneer 10 kept on going, or the Voyager. And it got far enough out where it was able to take films, pictures, digital footage, I guess, of this object. And it was posted. I saw pictures of it. I never did download it. And it looked like a big revolving red ball with haze around it. And it has moons trailing behind it, too. Anyway, that's called the Jesuit footage because the Jesuits secretly captured films. This image was transmitted by, telegraphy, transmitted by transmitters, digitally, just like they transmit information back from NASA probes and satellites. It was transmitted back to a secret base in Alaska, which was actually an abandoned oil refinery, which was used as a receiving station for the signals from this film or video footage space probe taking pictures of Planet X. And it came back, and that's how this guy from the Vatican got it, because it was received by the U.S. secret base in Alaska. And that's my story there from Cristoforo Barbato. And now that you can no longer find it, what does that tell you? That the information was probably true.
Yeah.
So that's basically what we have to look forward to. This thing sweeps the Earth. It's surrounded with this red iron oxide haze. Why? Why would it be surrounded with iron oxide? Because in deep space you do have larger quantities of iron oxide. And remember, this thing is like a gravitational vacuum cleaner. It picks up many objects of varying sizes in its orbit, and its orbital diameter is many millions of miles. So that when it comes in, and I'll tell you real quickly, this thing comes in below that glass. Visualize a glass circular tabletop, okay? Just the tabletop alone, has suspended in space with stars all around it. Draw a mental picture in your mind. Yeah. And on top of this glass tabletop, called the ecliptic, is in the center is a big bright ball which is the sun, and then further out is the other planets, Mercury, Venus. As you're going outward from the sun, it would be Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And so these objects, these planets, are all revolving around the sun, and below this glass circular tabletop in space, which we call the ecliptic, is Planet X coming in. Visualize it as a smaller little baby sun, much smaller than the big sun at the center of the tabletop. But this object is coming in from below. How do we know that? Because the late Dr. Robert S. Harrington, whom many of us believe was murdered because he was about to reveal the fact that he had sighted this object, taken photos of it from this U.S. Naval Observatory facility, down in Black Birch, New Zealand. You have to get down close to the South Pole in order to see it, because it's coming in the southern skies below the ecliptic, and that's why they had to go to the Black Birch, New Zealand Observatory to take photographs of it. And he was coming back. He said, when those photographs are developed, I am going to reveal to the public what we saw. And he used the blink comparison method, which takes blinking photos at various nights to see that one object amidst the billions of stars that is actually moving. The stars appear to be stationary. So if you do the blink comparison flashing method, you can see one object moving out of billions of them. And this one object was Planet X, and he determined, I believe, that the motion of this object was toward our solar system. It would naturally be coming in toward our solar system because our sun is a great gravitational fisherman whose mass is almost one-third of a million Earth masses, and thus it will pull in anything, even objects far out, such as this object, Planet X, that happen to be captured by our sun. And that's what they stated in the New York Times article of 1983, before they were suppressed by the National Security Agency, that all the astronomers in the New York Times January 30th, 1983 article state that this object is now, this was 1983, is now about 5 billion miles out, we believe, and that seems like a far distance. This is their words. Seems like a great distance. However, it is still within the gravitational pull of our sun, meaning that common sense tells you that if it was within the gravitational pull ever so slightly of our sun in 1983, it must have been continuously pulled in gradually closer and closer for the past 30 years from 1983 until now. And this is the 30th anniversary to the day of the discovery of it. I'm looking at my photocopy of the actual New York Times, not a transcript, but the actual photocopy of the front page, Washington Post, December 30th, 1983, exactly 33 years ago to the day, today. And the front page article reads, possibly as large as Jupiter, mystery heavenly body discovered. Written by Thomas O'Toole, Washington Post staff writer. Quote, a heavenly body, possibly as large as the giant planet Jupiter and possibly so close to Earth that it would be part of this solar system, has been found in the direction of the constellation Orion by an orbiting telescope aboard the U.S. infrared astronomical satellite. So mysterious. Now, here's where the lies come in. They know it's Planet X, but they're going to lie to you and tell you, well, we really don't know what it is. Okay. Quote, second paragraph. So mysterious is the object that astronomers do not know if it is a planet, a giant comet, a nearby protostar that never got hot enough to become a star. Incidentally, that's what it truly is. It is a protostar that never got hot enough to become a star. Or if it's a distant galaxy, so here's where the baloney comes in, the lies, the deception. Or is it a distant galaxy so young that it is still in the process of forming its first stars, or a galaxy, this is really nonsense, or a galaxy so shrouded in dust that none of the light cast by its stars ever gets through? Well, they had to throw in one piece of truth mixed in with all the other lies, that it indeed is a protostar, that is a baby star. Continuing on, quote, all I can tell you is that we don't know what it is. Dr. Jerry Neugebauer, infrared astronomical satellite chief scientist for California's Jet Propulsion Laboratory and director of the Palomar Observatory for the California Institute of Technology, said in an interview, the most fascinating explanation of this mysterious body is, which is so cold it casts no light and has never been seen by optical telescopes on Earth or in space, is that it is a giant gaseous planet as large as Jupiter and as close to Earth as 50 billion miles. Now get this. They go on to say, while that may seem like a great distance in earthbound terms, it is a stone's throw in cosmological terms, so close, in fact, that it would be the nearest heavenly body to Earth beyond our outermost planet, Pluto. Not making this up. This comes from none other than the White House. You can look up the White House. I just posted it. My friend sent it to me. And actually, an executive order or some kind of
for space weather
from the White House.
For space weather and how it can affect our power grid. Yep.
Something like that. Yeah, from the official government document saying there will get prepared for long-term power outages. So they're telling us about it. I mean, and what's his name? Ted Koppel, who used to be a ABC TV evening reporter. Mm-hmm. Ted Koppel, remember him?
Oh,
he
yeah.
wrote a book that warning about this. He wrote an entire book. And now Dr. Michio Kaku, a physicist at State University, I think, New York, or City University of New York, also is warning about it. So many people are warning about these power outage failures long term. The reason they would be long term is because the solar emissions that I was just talking about are what is causing, I believe, long-term chronic solar blasting. Is hitting the Earth's magnetic field. And you had asked me a question which I didn't really address yet. You said, has it got anything to do with our magnetic field? And well, the sun's solar electrified particles, protons and electrons, that are being blasted out in all directions, some of which strike Earth's magnetic field. Well, those moving electrons, as I mentioned before, they themselves, those streams of electrons coming from the sun and streams of protons, actually each stream creates a little magnetic field encircling it concentrically, sort of like a spring. If you were to take an arrow, here's another analogy, put an arrow through a coiled spring, a garage door spring, and that arrow would represent the straight line travel of the protons, which are positive electrically charged particles, or also that arrow would represent the straight line travel of the electrons, which are negative electric particles. Well, both kinds of particles create magnetic fields, which are sort of analogous in shape anyway to the coiled garage door spring. So you've got all these magnetic fields that are impacting trillions of them, in a big solar wave of particles called the solar wind, and blasting the Earth's magnetic field, creating electromagnetic streams like coils that I just described, which impact Earth's magnetic field. And now you have what I liken to electromagnetic jousting, where you see two people fighting with swords or with these long jousting poles, knights in armor, jousting one another. Well, you have the jousting of magnetic fields between the sun's solar blasting of magnetic fields and the Earth's magnetic field. And this impacts the Earth's magnetic field. It feeds back that energy from the sun, electromagnetic energy from the sun feeds back electromagnetically, right, from the Earth's outer core, like the skin of an apple, along the skin, right into the top of the apple, the dimple at the top of the apple, that goes into the center core, if you liken the Earth to an apple. So that electromagnetic energy travels thousands of miles from the Earth's magnetic field in space, right into the center of Earth, wherein is located our Earth's solid metal inner core. And that's what I believe has been laterally shifting Earth's solid metal inner core off of its center point and eventually causing the jet stream to ripple like a roller coaster.
If it continues, if it continues to go off center, and really unbalance things, wouldn't that in turn cause at some point a pole shift?
Definitely, you're right. It would cause a wobbling of Earth, and I expect to see a wobbling. I mean, we have to expect to see a wobbling.
Would we see that? I mean, if we were out at night looking at the stars, would we notice the wobble? Would we see it?
I'm glad you brought that up. The ancients, let's go by past reports. The ancient survivors of the last incursion of Planet X into our solar system, which occurred around 36 and a half centuries ago. And we can prove it. I'll try to make it quick because I don't want to get too far off of one point.
Okay.
But I want to prove to you that it occurred 36 and a half centuries ago. Our geologists studying the great Santorini explosion, which had a volcanic explosive index, VEI, greater than according to their studies of past geological events, greater than we've ever experienced in modern days. The great volcanic explosion of the Santorini volcano in the Aegean Sea on the island of Thera. It's well known. It destroyed the Minoan, highly civilized Minoan civilization. Well, that volcanic explosion, they can date it back by counting tree rings. Tree rings are a great way to with high resolution, determine a date in ancient history, because each year, as you know, the trees will grow one layer of skin. Mm-hmm. And then each year that skin piles up and builds up, so that if you were to cut the tree, you would be able to count the layers and tell the age of the tree. We all know that. So I guess the trees they're looking at were petrified trees, where they were able to do carbon dating, and with carbon dating you could determine the date of something that's petrified. So when you would put that together